Welcome back to the channel. And of course, I am Mr. B, and today we want to talk about culture. Is a burning issue on my agenda right now, and it should be for Jamaica. Now, you ever hear the argument that says Jamaica punches way above its weight? I'm sure most of you out there have heard this term. The reality is that Jamaica is a small country, 2.8 million people, with maybe an extra 1.5, 2 million people live in the diaspora, impacts the world in a way that is just amazing when one considers the amount of countries out there, much bigger than Jamaica, some 190 odd countries, and Jamaica is ranking in the top 10% as one of the most influential countries culturally in the world. So essentially, for a country like Jamaica that is so small, its culture and sports move the world in a way that is just unimaginable. Now, imagine if we were able to turn that influence into the island's next big economy. And it's not hard to do. And so today, I'm going to use this video just to touch on some areas that will indicate how we can show that culture and sport can earn money for Jamaica and Jamaicans and keep that money in Jamaica. And I also want to show why our ministries, the different ministries that the country have in place, and there are a couple of them, 4 that I've singled out, must finally work together to ensure that this happens. Now, Jamaica sits on 2 world-class assets: its cultural influence and its sporting influence. Now, from reggae music to dancehall, from Bob Marley and the Wailers to our sprinters, Jamaica exerts outsized, meaning significantly powerful cultural and athletic influence on the rest of the world. Yet the largest flows of money that come into Jamaica comes through tourism, but only about 20% of it actually stays in the island. Now, as I said, the largest outflow of our money is tourism remittances, which goes back outshore. Hotel-based tourism, of course, captures only a fraction of the total visitor spend. The smarter high retention strategy, therefore, must be to grow the domestic and creative and sports economy. And to do that, it is my view that the Ministry of Culture, Ministry of Sports, Education, and the Ministry of Industry and Commerce and Technology must move from their silo, individual approaches to a coordinated national strategy. This is not an abstract thinking. The global market for culture and sports is huge. Conservative estimates is that culture and sports on a global level contribute some $3 to $4 trillion a year, and it continues to grow. This is monetizable from a Jamaica standpoint. This is an industry that is monetizable in ways that will keep those revenues in Jamaica. So let's take a look at where we are. Now, we spend a lot of money and we put a lot of emphasis on tourism. We raise up a lot of tourism infrastructure, and the government successive administration, because it's not a JLP or a PNP problem, it's a Jamaica problem, right? Tourism has been our go-to economic industry for decades. Most of that money, as I said earlier, leaks offshore. In the Caribbean region, tourism is commonly referred to as extremely high in terms of its leakage. Estimates cite that more than 80% of tourism revenues basically goes back out of the country. Meanwhile, the global cultural and sports markets are massive and growing. That is an opportunity that we have. For example, UNESCO years ago declared Jamaica and Kingston in particular as a cultural and creative city. Let me rephrase that: a creative cultural city. And in terms of its reference, it pointed out that this is a city that has given some 6 or 7 genres of music to the world. What have we done with it? Absolutely nothing. The same UNESCO, some 2 years later, because this was somewhere between 2015 or thereabouts when the UNESCO thing came up. So a couple of years later, UNESCO basically determined reggae to be such an important component of the global culture that they accorded it a protected status. The question is, what have we done with reggae music over the years? And so what we want to therefore look at is the influence of our culture in terms of the music. Reggae and dancehall are global cultural currencies. Again, as I say, UNESCO recognized reggae as a cultural treasure. Our athletes are regarded as among the world's fastest ambassadors. Look at Shelley and Fraser-Pryce, who just announced their retirement from track and field. Shelley, perhaps one of the oldest athletes at the World Championships, but garnered most of the media attention because of our impact on the sport. What have we done with personalities like that? And Jamaica produces Shellyans and Usain Bolts and so on, like is almost nothing, but we have done nothing with it. So it is my view that these personalities, these cultural and sporting areas are all exportable, high margin products. Music, such as music streaming, licensing, film, sports branding, sports tourism, coaching, and sports technology. We don't need to build one more hotel room or put one more bed in a hotel room. What we need to do is to own the content, to take ownership of the content that we are producing. Take ownership of our music. Take ownership of the business potential of our sporting personalities. Once we own that content, the intellectual property, talent development, and tech platforms. The problem that we have is that we have this fragmented approach. I hear the minister in the presentation of a green paper in the House of Representatives earlier on this week talk about putting this cultural program together, which was going to be spread over the next 10 years, which means that it's going to take a little while. While we have been benefiting from this, we have owned this for time immemorial, we still haven't come to terms with how we can take it to the next level. As far as I'm concerned, the problem with Jamaica is that the snags that we have that impact our ability to get anything done is primarily institutional. Culture, sports, education, industry, and commerce. These ministries operate in their own individual silos. They don't talk to each other. And what you need in order for this to work is a coordinated approach. Policies such as funding and digital capacity remains fragmented. And the technology revolution means that the ministries need younger, digitally fluent minds who understand NFTs, who understand streaming, economics, sports analytics, and intellectual property monetization. Now, here's what a coordinated policy will deliver. One, it will keep more value on the island by developing domestic production, rights management, and local distribution, which means because we're doing this internally, and it doesn't require a significant amount of foreign exchange input to get us started. The reality is that the revenues we generate, the majority of that remains on island. It turns athletes into brands and coaches into export services. We can then piggyback on that to set up sports academies, training camps, and licensing, right? What we need to do is to sit down with all of the 4 or so ministries that I pointed out, because we're going to need all of these to make this thing work. We have to move away from this individual ministerial silo approach, right? And put the thing together. We need to scale our music and film intellectual properties, sync licensing for games, ads, films, co-productions, and streaming first strategies. Build creative tech hubs tied to universities and diaspora investors, so that talent retention and remote jobs can be created and maintained back in Jamaica, where those revenues, once they are earned, they remain there. We need to start with a practical, with an interministerial innovation and cultural sports council, which include young tech leads, creative producers, sports commercial directors, intellectual property lawyers, education representatives, private sector partners. We need to fund, I would say, there are 3 pilots. 1, a global streaming hubs for Jamaican music and film. 2 is an internationally accredited sports academy with commercial partnerships. And the 3rd one is a creative tech incubator attached to the university, whichever university that is, whether it's University of West Indies, University of Technology, or the Edna Manley facility. We need to get this out of the ground now. These these entities that we're looking at creating and raising up, they will retain the revenues that they earn. The majority of those revenues will be retained in Jamaica. So if we are serious about raising the per capita GDP in Jamaica, what it requires is a much more focused and coordinated program that looks at the country's greatest resources. And that is not sun and sea and thing. That is the people of Jamaica. It is the young people that are creating music, that are developing intellectual property, right? Developing products that becomes intellectual property. It is the young people who are the tracks athletes, the stars that are taking Jamaica's name round the world. The man we revere, Robert Nesta Marley, without realizing that when Marley was just coming through the gate, he was no older than about 18 or 19 years old. The same is true with most of our athletes. When we look at people like a Usain Bolt or the Shelley and Fraser-Pryces, in their heyday, they were youngsters. It therefore means that if these young people are the ones that are carrying the banner of the country around the world multiple times, right? Robert Nesta Marley and the Wailers took reggae to over 170 countries around the world. And they did this before he was 30 years old. So it's the youth that we have to invest into, right? We have to take a look at industry dancehall. Instead of attaching a negative label onto dancehall, we need to recognize its value. Dancehall business is a multi-billion-dollar business in Japan, in Ghana, in all of these African countries where reggae is now fusing with Afrobeats to create a different kind of sound. Who you think is doing it? Young people. But if we don't wake up and make ourselves alive to this thing, this boat is passing us. Culture is worth, as I said before, in excess of $3 trillion a year globally. We don't need to own 50% of that. We don't even need 10%. What we need to do is to look at the fact that we have these resources and we need to take advantage of it. Jamaica's culture and sports are what I call global gold, absolute global gold, and it is time to mine it smarter, right? If you like this video, hit the like button and tell me what you think in the comment section. Share with your friends. I'd love to get you guys' feedback out there on how we can get this working. I am Mr. B, and I will see you again with the next video.